From the studios of TLC Talk Radio, it's TashaTalkz. I'm your girl, Tasha. Don't forget to follow us on our social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and of course, YouTube. And catch our programming on TLCTalkRadio.com, 24/7 edutainment. And today's conversation revolves around self-care in the workplace. And we're going to discuss it with some specificity relating to the Black man in corporate America. We will not sugarcoat covert racism, as you know, runs rampant, unless you're one of these people in denial, and I'm just not sure what you're thinking about. But here today on TashaTalkz is Program Manager Vaughn Harrison of Harrison Vaughn Consulting. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming. So our conversation about this happened by accident. We were discussing plans for future collaborations. And as I mentioned, the focus of the show and relationships, you kind of brought this up. So I'm going to give you some co-producer credit for today's show. And you had some experiences that we kind of briefly, touched on. But before we get into that, tell us about you. Who is Vaughn Harrison and what is his passion career-wise?
So my background is engineering, project management, and program management.
Okay.
Program management is my passion.
Got it.
And that's all about developing strategies, determining solutions, figuring out the best things to do, best projects to do to deliver results.
Okay.
I do love engineering, but at this stage in my life, at this age, it's all about program management.
Got it. And how did you come into that?
Honestly, I think it's something that's always been inside of me to develop strategies. I've always had a passion for economic and community development. So it's just something I think that's always been in me. I've always loved engineering.
Okay.
But for some reason, I just have that ability to identify problems and create solutions. And that's kind of what I've fallen into over the years.
Good. It's probably a calling. And so full disclosure, Vaughn and I have worked together on a project, working together on a current project. And man, when I say thorough, when I say solution oriented, people who know me know that I'm quick to go, that's okay, I don't want to work with you. So that we've maintained a professional relationship, and now we're here, says a lot about you. So I appreciate you coming on to the show. Before we start with some stories, when we chatted, you gave an incredible analogy, and it was amazing. And I'm going to just be quiet and let you give that analogy because my viewers, my listeners are intelligent enough to pick up on it.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. I'm going to not read it verbatim.
Sure.
But I'll just give you some key points. So just imagine this. If you've been invited to a party, the very first party, you received an invitation and you attended the party in casual attire. When you arrived at the party, you realized that everyone else was dressed formally.
Sure.
But you had no idea that you should have been dressed formally. As a result, you didn't get paid for that first party. You receive another invitation to a second party. This time you dressed formally based on what you experienced on that first party. But now you notice everyone else is dressed casually. So again, you won't get paid because you didn't conform to what everybody else was doing. The third party, you received another invitation. This time, however, you attempt to reach out to the various guests that you saw before. But you notice they all speak a different language, which you don't speak. No problem, though, because you came prepared. You have some attire that's casual and formal. But once you get there, you realize, wait a second, this is a pool party. You don't have any swimming trunks.
Right.
So again, you don't conform. You don't get paid. The fourth party comes up. Now, in anticipation of that fourth party, you do a lot of studying. You forego sleep for a week to make sure you can communicate now with the various members of that party. This time, when you get there, you learn that there's an entrance fee. The entrance fee you can't pay because you haven't been paid for any of the parties you've attended. So now you can't even get into that fourth party. Now, you reach out to the event planner and you try and get some feedback on, what you can do to gain access to the parties, to conform and do what's right. The event planner gives you some information and you take that information and now you're well prepared. So the upcoming party, you attend it and everything is going well, except all the attendees, the guests, complain because you received some inside information that they did not receive. Mm-hmm. As a result, even though you were prepared this time, everyone says, no, let's forego payment. So no one gets paid this time. What can you do next? You don't know. The upcoming party, you prepare for the upcoming party. You're excited. You know that you've done all the things you should have done. Sure. You're ready. When you arrive to the upcoming party, no one that you see is familiar. Everyone is different. Mm-hmm. Also, they all speak a different language now. So now you can't even communicate with those individuals who were at that party. You discover that all of the colleagues from the first party, they're at a different venue right now. You didn't even know about the different venue because of the single party that you did not attend because you didn't receive payment from that second party. They talked about another venue. There's a completely different venue that group of party goers is now attending. You never knew about it. So in the essence is everything is changing. It's a moving target. Mm-hmm. As much as you attempt to conform and do the right things, and you have prepared to do things the right way, sometimes it becomes difficult to even meet expectation.
Yeah. Impossible, it sounds like.
It could be next to impossible, and I don't like to use the word impossible, but knowing what I know now, it seems to be almost impossible. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so you think about that. It's, we've always been told as Black folk, you're going to work twice as hard to get half as far. You walk into a room, you know that you're smarter than some of these people in here. But you have to, I guess, shift. The word shape shift comes to mind. I've been watching Ghostbuster documentaries, so maybe I need to lay off the Netflix. But seriously, that's what it feels like. As soon as you get what you need, then they change it. As you mentioned, the moving target. So you have to stifle your personality, right? You have to walk into this room. These people are quite possibly less talented. Talk about the mental load that you have to take on in those spaces.
So that word stifle, I don't think it clearly explains what's happening. When you attempt to stifle someone's personality, I think it's sometimes easier to accept. Okay. Because maybe you can change your personality some just to kind of adapt to that environment. Corporate America is more emasculating. You are not able as a man to change your manhood. You're a man.
That's right.
In corporate America, the goal ultimately is to emasculate, especially Black men. And let me be very honest with you. The same spirit which existed on the plantation, quite frankly, exists in corporate America. It's that power structure. Sure. It's the slave master attempting to demonstrate his prowess over you. And that's why it turns into emasculation. So yes, stifling could be a good word to explain it, but it's not deep enough. It doesn't fully explain what's happening on what I call the plantation of corporate America. Some of the notes that I wrote down is that, of course, it is the same power structure that we saw in the slavery days, but also think about Jim Crow. Sure. So interestingly, I was preparing to post something today on social media, and I actually hit the post button. And almost instantaneously, someone responded with some feedback that I didn't appreciate. But it was talking about I am a man. If you recall years ago, I think it was around 68, 69, right before King was assassinated, there was a protest with some of the, I forget which industry they were in, maybe garbage collectors.
Yes, that's why he was in Memphis.
That's right. And someone was crushed, and they had picket signs declaring their manhood. I am a man. The same type of demonic power structure that existed in the slavery days existed during Jim Crow.
Sure.
It exists in corporate America. The goal is to try and demonstrate to you that you really aren't a man. We are in power. We are in control. You must be subservient to us. So that's why I like to say maybe the stifling isn't the word I want to use. It's emasculation.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so difficult to endure and participate in that corporate game.
How did you cope? How did you deal with these attempts at emasculation?
That's a good question. I did not cope. What I attempted to do was mask the anger and the frustration that I had. Oftentimes, what you may see is that individuals who are in those high-paying jobs, they may have a lot of fancy attire, a lot of expensive homes and cars, toys and trinkets.
Sure.
These are all things that you purchase to fill this void that you have in your life. You're trying to create happiness because happiness is not there inside of you because you pour so much of yourself into the organization. So that's how you attempt to cope. But it's a terrible coping mechanism.
For sure.
It's a facade. And that's why oftentimes, you may see a lot of people in corporate America who have very high power jobs. You may see divorce rates are very high because deep down inside, they really aren't happy. They're miserable because every single day you have to go to this plantation. You have to go to this corporate playing field, the battlefield, and put on something that doesn't represent you. You have to put on this facade to always prove that you are somebody else. That's the expectation. And that's why it's so difficult to cope. It's almost impossible.
You're trying to prove that you're not a threat. Because inherently,
absolutely,
the black man is seen as a threat. Doesn't matter what you're doing, doesn't matter anything. You're seen as a threat.
Absolutely. And that's even when you have on a shirt and tie.
For sure.
And what I can tell you is that when you put on a shirt and tie, you're seen as a greater threat because now you are threatening their position. So you have a threat of an individual who could be perceived as being a thug. Maybe he doesn't have on the right attire, a polo shirt, khaki pants, loafers, whatever the case may be. When you put on that shirt and tie, they understand now you are intelligent, perhaps. You have these degrees. You have an understanding of this corporate dynamic. You are a greater threat now to my livelihood. Again, it goes back to the slavery days, Jim Crow era. They do not want you to take their position, so they have to do something to keep you under their thumb. It's emasculation. It always goes back to emasculation. That's why it's so difficult to navigate in that corporate sphere.
Wow. Yeah. And so you trying to carry that load is too heavy to carry anything else. You mentioned divorce rates. I would imagine men in corporate America with children, there may be some fracturing of relationships. Maybe you're not there. Maybe you're working constantly. Maybe you're missing these important things, your children's plays, sports games, piano recitals, all of that. And I don't know that those of us who are not in it appreciate that that load. And so that's even illuminating to me. Like in my mind, I think I would know that. But no, I'm hearing you and I'm hearing you now. So I get it.
You're hearing me.
I'm hearing you.
Most people don't hear me.
Wow. And so in that regard, they just think, okay, well, we all had a rough day at work, but no, this is very different. Like I had a rough day at work the other day, but it wasn't that. It was, all right, little 8th graders, y'all on my nerves, but I'm going to go home and I'm going to cook some dinner and I'll be fine.
Right.
It's not the same as literally taking your personhood, right? That's your personhood is a threat. You just being is a threat. And so now you have to do all of these things to not be perceived that way. That's very heavy. That's very, very heavy. And I'm only speaking from listening. So yeah. What stories, Vaughn, can you share without obviously divulging critical information? What can you share? Give us some examples of these attempts at emasculation.
At the level that I was always in, I would participate in a lot of V-level meetings where you have lots of senior VPs, lots of directors, folks who report directly to C-level team leaders, CEOs, CFOs, things of that nature. During those meetings, I was always required to present factual data about some type of project or program. There are multiple instances where one of my team leaders or supervisors told me directly that the information I was presenting was too factual. And here's why that's important. Because when you present something that's factual, especially from a business perspective, that factual evidence demands action.
Sure.
But when you are a black man presenting factual evidence in a V-level executive meeting, that means ultimately you are telling a white man to do something. It's a black man that's instructing a white man to do something. That's not well received. Again, the power structure. Because see, now the order is off because the white man, unfortunately, is perceived to be on top. And who was this black man coming in here telling me what to do? So the factual information is a threat.
For sure.
You shouldn't even know this information. And on top of that, the nerve of you to tell me what to do.
Even though I asked you to.
Even though you are required to present data supporting your program, your project. I don't want to hear your data because your data, your evidence tells me you must do something. You now, because what would happen is in those meetings, when I produce evidence, something beneficial for the organization, they must now come back and report to the same V-level leaders and C-level leaders. So again, now that makes it look like I'm in control. The nerve of me to do that.
How dare you come in here and be smart?
Absolutely.
And so when we talk about systems, now I'm kind of talking to listeners who don't believe us when we say systems are in place. It is systemic. This is what we're talking about. And so you come in, you do the job that's required. And there's anger behind it. There's discontent. There's, what we call hate. And it's just like the analogy you gave. Here's a target. I hit the target. No, that wasn't the right target. We're sorry. We gave you the wrong target. Here, this is the target. Okay. And so I hit that target. Wait, that was wrong too. And so absolutely, as a human being, you're going to get frustrated. So yeah, absolutely. I get it. Yeah, I'm hearing you.
I appreciate that. Now, if I can say this, some people may never understand what we're talking about until you reach a certain point from a salary perspective. $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, even $80,000 or $90,000, depending on the industry, you may never experience what I'm talking about. It's not until you get to the much higher levels where you start, exceeding six figures and you start engaging with people, quite frankly, who are millionaires, that you have to endure this. It's a completely different dynamic once you start making a certain amount of money. Completely different.
Wow. Now, see, in my mind, it's at all levels, but I'm guessing to some degree on a smaller scale, sure. But yeah, that's key. That's important. I'm glad you illuminated that, because that's not something that I think the average person would have known. Like you said, that's just not something we would know, particularly for me, not being in that field. Wow. Dealing with it. How long were you in that corporate space?
20 long years.
20 long years.
Very long years. Yes.
Wow.
Interestingly, my 5th year anniversary from my escape from the plantation is November 29th, 2021.
Wow.
This morning, I watched a video that I recorded of myself leaving corporate.
Wow.
And it's powerful. This past 5 years has probably been one of the most difficult times in my life, making that transition from guaranteed money to non-guaranteed money.
For sure.
There is a different dynamic that exists in the non-corporate space that exists in the corporate space. I'm thankful for leaving with an asterisk. But again, the dynamic is different. I can sleep much better now. In corporate, I didn't sleep much at all.
We talked about exhaustion.
Yeah. So imagine that, being exhausted but can't sleep. So think about how heavy that is. I would oftentimes come home and literally, when I enter the door, lay on the floor. I was that tired but couldn't fall asleep.
Wow.
The last month, I believe, going out to the corporate office, I was at the gas station and I had to get gas in the car, but couldn't even get the strength to get out the vehicle to put gas in the car. It wasn't physical exhaustion. It's the mental exhaustion. It's just being overwhelmed. And again, not everyone understands the depth of this mental impact. It is heavy.
For sure.
And I can assure you that there are a lot of Black men at these levels. I speak to them oftentimes. Quite frankly, they cry.
Sure.
I think I expressed to you before that in one organization I worked for many years ago, someone committed suicide because they had done all the right things for a promotion. They played the game. They did the tap dancing. They played the fiddle.
Sure.
They were overlooked. They committed suicide.
That's that mental load.
It's the mental load. It is difficult to express without experiencing it.
I think, though, you're doing a good job of even just bringing it to people's attention here today with me. Now, I had a question, but I'm going to interject this one. What was the straw? What was the straw that said, okay, I'm out, I'm not doing this anymore?
Wow. That's a phenomenal question. There were so many straws.
Okay.
So around 2014, I took a short leave of absence because my blood pressure, I left work and I went to the doctor's office and the nurse took my blood pressure and she kind of had a funny look on her face and she took it again. And my blood pressure at the time was 200 something over 130, 140. And she looked at me in a strange way. And I'm like,
what? Right.
I knew I always felt overwhelmed, but I had no idea.
My God.
Yeah, exactly. That's what, yeah. So at that point in 2014, I took a small break.
Sure.
In error, because I was addicted to the money and the lifestyle, I went back.
Okay.
When I went back, believe it or not, this is strange. It tells you how deep this is. When I went back, they gave me more money. Right, exactly. So think about that. It's kind of like, and I don't want to talk against the NFL or NBA or things like that, but a lot of people often talk about how the NFL or NBA could be high-paid servants as well, high-paid slaves.
Okay.
You get that money and you become addicted to it and you do more and you display your abilities more and more. You're doing what's expected of you.
Sure.
They give you more money because they want you to stay. If you have a lot of money and you have a good slave, you will pay that good slave more money because that good slave is making you more money. So even though you won't put that good slave in a position of true power, you pay that good slave. That good slave believes power is in money because that good slave, me, was the good slave. I can now buy more toys and trinkets. So because I was leveraging toys and trinkets to fill the gaping hole in my life, getting more money gave me a false sense of happiness because I can now buy more toys and trinkets.
Sure.
I went back, made the mistake of going back, got the additional money. Another big project was presented to me. And of course, they put me at the head of that project with some other things that I was responsible for doing. Very high level project. And I would have to do additional research, which needed more resources. No additional resources were given. So the additional resources that should have been given, each person may have been paid $80,000 or $90,000 per year. But opposed to paying 2 or 3 people $80,000 or $90,000 per year, they gave me $20,000 more. I'm happy, but I'm doing the work of 2 additional people. So I wasn't sleeping anyway. So to show that I am good at earning this money and producing results, I'm going to literally stay up overnight and work.
Wow.
Because I cannot not produce.
Sure.
I have to show that I am worth this extra amount of money. I couldn't take it.
Yeah.
I got sick.
Wow.
Had to walk away.
Wow. Yeah. I'm still amazed at your blood pressure numbers and you walked in there because, wow. Yeah. So that was a straw. In that space, Vaughn, did you have a mentor? Were you a mentor or are you a mentor now? Did you navigate this by yourself or was there someone else who said, hey, let me show you what you should and shouldn't do?
So first off, I didn't go to a designer school. I didn't pledge a fraternity or anything like that. So I didn't have a mentor who I could speak to in that regard.
Okay.
There are not many Black men or women in certain industries at certain levels. Mm. Most of those Black men, especially who are at those levels, are going through the same things I'm going through. Mm-hmm. It's difficult to have a conversation with someone and seek counsel if they're struggling with the same things. Yeah. And then there are other Black people who are in those positions who are in denial. Mm. You can't even begin to fathom trying to speak with them because everything they tell you is you're the problem. Just ignore the obvious. We would always have a joke that in corporate America, they would want you to believe that the wetness coming down on your head was rain and not urination.
So now I've adopted you as one of my dear friends because I say that all the time. Don't tinkle on me and say it's raining. I know the difference. So yeah, absolutely.
That's the expectation.
That is the gaslighting.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Right. So no mentors. I was out there in the middle of the ocean all by myself.
Wow.
Just praying.
Good strategy. And the exit was even better. And so do you mentor now? Has anyone sought out your counsel?
A number of people have different industries, however.
Okay.
Individuals who have asked me to mentor them are dealing with, unfortunately, our people who experience what I call self-hatred. So they want to pay you a lower salary because you're Black. And this is in construction, by the way.
Okay.
These are individuals who own construction companies or they are general contractors and they want some assistance on building their organization. But the challenges they have is that they're trying to market to individuals who look like us, Black, that really can't afford their services. So they want to pay these individuals a less amount of money.
Wow.
So people ask me, how do I navigate through that? Again, that's a different dynamic.
Yeah.
So imagine me coming from one dynamic where people who don't like me will pay me a ton of money, still hate me, but they'll pay me a ton of money, and then enter into another environment, another career path where people look like me, and you would think they would love me because I've had all these experiences and I can bring a wealth of information to them. They don't want to pay me. Those are the people who ask me to mentor them because they're struggling. How do I get my people to pay me the correct way? It's a very interesting dynamic, a very interesting world that we live in.
For sure. For sure. What is the advice? Obviously, you can't mentor people here on the radio show, and I'm not in that field. But if you had some advice that you wanted to give to people who are right now in that ocean alone, because as you said, there are very few of us in those spaces, what would you say?
Figure out what makes you happy, period. If money makes you happy, understand that in order to make a certain amount of money, you must give up a piece of yourself, period. You must.
Wow.
That is a requirement. If you are not prepared to give up a piece of yourself, give up your family, give up who you are as a man or a woman, trust me, you will not make money at certain levels in corporate America. If, however, you enjoy life and you enjoy family and your so-called freedom, then you may have to be willing to forego a certain amount of money. Again, find out what's most important to you first. What makes you happy.
Wow. And in the middle of that, how can they take care of themselves in this space? Is it possible?
Pray. That's it.
Best advice I've heard.
Yeah, there is, quite frankly, admittedly, I can say that I went to psychologists, not psychiatrists,
Right.
Psychologist, therapist, someone who specialized, in fact, in Black psychology.
Sure.
It helped some, but you have to find something within yourself. You have to pray, because quite frankly, this is it's a spiritual battle.
I was about to say, it's a spiritual battle.
It's no doubt about that. So that's why, there's nothing on the outside that will correct this. This is the world we live in. There's no easy answer.
Yeah. And you're right. It's going to take a lot of internal review, literally internal review, to decide what you think is best. And I think that's a great note to end on. How can people reach out to you if they need your services?
I would prefer that people reach out to me via email or on my website. My website is www.vaughnharrison.com. That's VAUGHNHARRISON.com. or via email at vaughn@vaughnharrison.com.
Thank you. Thank you so much for
Thank you for having me.
Man, I really appreciate it. It was a great illumination on the topic. You will be back because as I mentioned to the listeners and the viewers that we had something completely different in mind, but this came up and I thought it was incredibly important. From the studios of TLC Talk Radio, this is TashaTalkz. I'm your girl Tasha. Don't forget to follow us on all of our social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and of course YouTube, and catch us on TLCTalkRadio.com, 24/7 edutainment. We'll catch you next time.